Yesterday, there was a recruiter who asked me a very specific question, which actually raised some red flags with me. So let me explain why this was. So this was another strategy role, and she asked me, were there instances in your life you had to push for something you didn't want to or you feel was necessary? And I've had this question several times, and there's a problem with asking this question because this is a values check question. This is a cultural check. And there is no way for you to check if the same culture happens inside the organization. So as somebody who's managing your organization, you want to check if everybody is, being heard, right? Being heard is actually something you have to manage per stakeholder. It's not some hypothetical thing. It's your direct stakeholder, your first the person you're reporting to. The person you're reporting to is the person who dictates if it is a inclusive environment or not. And if you ask that question, like, are you the type of person that bends over, just asks what the boss wants and just takes the direction? Or are you the person that pushes for things, especially if they think that it's needed? Now, I've had this problem before where the company wants to make this change, has this cultural perspective, but internally there were some people who did not have the same culture. They would say inclusiveness or like respect or things like that. They try to play it differently. So why is this question very important? If you are somebody who's coming into an organization who says, we are this, but they're not actually doing that, that's a problem. So technically, even that question is a useless question because you just have to gauge if the person has the capability to be flexible within these situations. And rightly so, those are what situational questions actually do. But the reality, as somebody who is going for top management positions, you should be careful of when you say it. And the best way to sell is for people to like you. And if your direct manager likes you, then he or she will be more receptive to change. And how you phrase it and how you present is another thing altogether, right? Because people decide based on emotions. And if you say that I'm always going to be presenting like this, and push for what I want, but that's not something that's welcome all of the time, or you'd have to put some padding before you make that statement, it doesn't really matter if you ask this question. It's more of like something you'll find out after the deal. And this is the risk that all employer-employee relationships have, because you would have to take that bet and they would have to take that bet that it will work out. No matter what core values you say, company culture, there's no way for you to check or audit if this is really happening, right? Acquisition is not really that close, especially for bigger companies, with the HR business partners that are partnering with the contracts themselves. And especially if you are with bigger corporations, HR does not have that type of influence with that type of level, right? And this is a main breaking point as why they're having that right mix of talent is difficult, especially when you're trying to create a bigger team and highly specialized departments, as well as big companies who are trying to employ people. And it's a difficult task to do. Asking, I feel, is a bit, I think that question should be improved into like, have you had the flexibility, to have you work with this and that? And rightly so, the person who asked me had a series of questions to gauge how that would happen. And of course, it would be based on their understanding of what they prefer. But at the end of it all, it would be, have you encountered a very strict autocratic system, and have you encountered a very organic system, organization, and how did you integrate into it? Is the more valid question functionally, but how you ask that on a layman term might be a little bit more nuanced. But if you're talking to somebody at a C level, they already know what you're after, and I feel like it's something that can be improved. So how to use this information? If you find yourself in a situation like this, I think it's best to give the situations you've experienced both, and how you've experienced them, and how you went over them, like with the STAR response: situation, task, action, and result. Okay, hope that was helpful.